you may well know. Tonight is one of, maybe 14 now of Monday Music at the Museum that we've done. We've been doing these since early May. So it's a way to serve our community, and we had the idea that in the midst of all this that's happening in our world, we wanted to do something that would bring people songs of hope in the midst of this. So we've done everything from kids playing the piano and kids' songs to classical cello and piano music and a little bit of everything in between. But tonight we're really honored because we have something really special. We have not done anything like this. Tonight we have cowboy songs and poetry from a man who's been doing this for a pretty long time in our area, and his name is Glen Bair. And so we're really thrilled to have him. With that, I'm going to introduce Mr. Glen Bair, and thank you so much.
Hi there. I'm just an old farmer with a hobby, and I'm glad you're out there. I assume you're out there. I'm going to do a poem to start this little shindig out. We live about 9 or 10 miles out of town, and every time we come to town, I open a window and tell my wife, if I pass out from hyperventilating, you might have to take the wheel, because I love the smell of alfalfa. I love it so much I wrote a poem about it. It's called The Smell of Hay, of course. There's something that I love about the country way of life. It's more than just the quiet peace and lack of city strife. A fringe benefit, I guess you'd say, of living way out there is the sweet smell of alfalfa as it moves upon the air. It starts out early in the spring when the hay is just inches tall, and it stays all through the summer till the last cool days of fall. There are several different stages, and each one has its own smell. As I pass by fields in the evening, my old nostrils start to swell. When it's lush and green and growing, and there's moisture in the ground, being just downwind at sunset is the freshest place around. And if it blooms before it's cut, most any farmer knows the smell of those little purple flowers could humble even a rose. Then the swather comes along and makes a nice windrow. This is one of the smells they have in heaven. I haven't been there, I just know. In a few days, when it's almost cured but not quite ready to bale, I drive by fields with windows down, wishing I didn't have to exhale. Later, when it's in the stack, the scent is rich and dry. I almost hyperventilate whenever I go by. When the water's turned back on the field to begin the second crop, a whiff of the soil as it takes it in has to be right near the top. But best of all, in wintertime, my favorite smell somehow. When I feed the cattle in the snow, I almost wish I was a cow. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks so much for those of you who are tuning in. We've got a little audience going here. I hope you enjoyed that. Did that have a title, Glenn?
The Smell of Hay.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to sing a song now. Most of my stuff is something you've never heard, but this one I just liked it so much that I learned it. It's a Tim McGraw song, Humble and Kind, something we all need a little more of. There's a light that glows by the front door. Don't forget the keys under the mat. When the childhood starts shining, always stay humble and kind. Go to church 'cause your mama says to. Visit grandpa every chance that you can. It won't be wasted time. Always stay humble and kind. Hold the door, say please, say thank you. Don't steal and don't cheat and don't lie. I know you've got mountains to climb. Always stay humble and kind. When the dreams you're dreaming come to you, when the work you put in is realized, let yourself feel the pride. Always stay humble and kind. Don't expect a free ride from no one. Don't hold a grudge or a chip, and here's why. Bitterness keeps you from flying. Always stay humble and kind. know the difference between sleeping with someone and sleeping with someone you love. I love you ain't no pickup line, so always stay humble and kind. Hold the door, say please, say thank you. Don't steal, don't cheat, don't lie. You know you've got mountains to climb. Always stay humble and kind. When the dreams you're dreaming come to you, when the work you put in is realized, let yourself feel the pride. Always stay humble and kind. Turn off the AC and roll windows down. Let that summer sunshine always stay humble and kind. Don't take for granted the love this life gives you. Forget where you're going, don't forget to turn back around. Help the next one in line, always stay humble and kind. Always stay humble and kind. Well, that's a good song. I was going to do these in different order, but this brings a poem to mind that I was going to do later. I'm going to do it now because we learned in the song that we should be kind to people. And you know, there's always a bully. We hear a lot about bullying nowadays. And I'm going to tell a story about a Quincy native. Phil Bell is his name. He lived here. He's gone now. His son Paul works out at Coy's Irrigation, and Paul told me this story years ago on a camp out with a bunch of kids, and I was in my poetry mood that day, and so when we were headed down the mountain, I dictated this poem to Paul, and he wrote it on a grocery sack, and by the time we got to the bottom of the mountain, this poem was done. It's called Phil and the Bully. When Phil was just a kid in school, he always did his best. He did his homework every day and passed most every test. The teacher, Mrs. Johnson, was as strict as she could be. When those kids got in trouble, she would send them to the tree where they would cut a switch for her. And then when they returned, she'd take that switch and use it well until their fannies burned. There was one kid she never switched. His name was Jack Duval. She was about half scared of him because he had grown so tall. He pulled the girls' hair in class and shoved the boys around. Whenever he came in the room, you couldn't hear a sound. But the favorite trick he liked to pull was to take Phil's lunch away, because he knew how good Phil's mom made bread. So he took it every day. After several weeks without a lunch and his patience almost gone, he finally went home one day and told what was going on. Mabel Bell was not an ornery sort, and she kind of understood. After all, she made a darn good lunch, and she knew her bread was good. So she said to Phil, "Don't worry now, there is something we can do. We'll just fix him up a special treat as a gift from me and you." Then she sent Phil out to their corral, and a gleam was in her eye. She said, "Find him something not too fresh, but a fairly stale cow pie." While he got the pie, she cut the bread from the center of the loaf. She sliced it thick and with a smile said, "We'll teach that ornery oaf." Then she cut a nice tomato and some fresh green lettuce too. She even put on mayonnaise. Then came that old cow poo. She wrapped it up all nice and neat and sent Phil off to school. He skipped all the way in that day. Couldn't wait to see the fool. Big Jack sat way back in the back and over near the door. Little Phil, who sat right up front, put his lunch down on the floor, and every time he noticed Jack was looking up his way, he'd move the lunch a little, quite unlike another day. By noon, Jack wanted it so bad that he could hardly wait. He didn't have a notion yet of what soon would be his fate. When he said, "Phil, give me your lunch," Phil said, "Come on now, Jack. but he held the lunch up to him and handed it in the sack. He opened it up quickly and pulled the sandwich out. Took a great big bite of it. He had no cause to doubt. He began to chew with a big grin. But the grin began to fade, and he asked Phil, with his mouth still full, with what was this thing made? Now the grin that faded from Jack's face was a new thing that Phil wore. He said, "You are eating cow crap, Jack. Would you like to have some more?" Well, Jack got up and walked around and spit and spit and spit. He said, "I ought to wring your neck," but the whole class had a fit. Mrs. Johnson said, "Now listen, Jack, it's time we stood up to you. You had this lesson coming, so I'll tell you what you'll do." Then she called him down right then and there and made all the kids real proud. And when Phil went home that afternoon, he was walking on a cloud. He had stood up to the bully, and the rest had all joined in. From then on, they were all happy. Jack never bothered them again. If it was only so simple, right?
Oh, that was great. I know all of you watching at home really enjoyed that. So let us know, hit the little heart or the little thumbs up to let us know that you've heard it and are watching. And thanks so much for being on tap today, live stream.
All right. A lot of the songs I do are, I've written a few, but I have friends in this hobby that have written some nice songs. And a friend of mine named George Thompson from down by Yakima. He's an old cowboy, horses and cattle all his life. And he wrote this next song for his mom. It's called Mama's Flowers. If I can remember how it starts, I'll sing it. Really, I will. Let's see.
That's okay. Glen's having what we all call a senior moment, right?
I am a senior.
Yeah, we are. So thanks.
Oh, I found it.
Oh, you found it.
I
Okay.
found it right back here in the corner. Okay. There's a picture dear to me in my fading memory of the place I spent my childhood hours on a little backwoods farm in a home so bright and warm, and a garden that was filled with Mama's flowers. On those lazy summer days when we were kids at play, no idea of the future that was ours. Rough and tumble homes come and games, we did our share of rain and pain. But there were things we didn't do around Mama's flowers. Red and yellow, blue and gold, we brought her joy and fed her soul. She'd be out there in the early morning hours, finding time to be alone with the baby she had sown. There was love in every one of Mama's flowers. How many years have come and gone, we've all left our childhood home. Strangers live in that old place that once was ours. But every now and then my thoughts go back to when we were children playing games in Mama's flowers. Now Mama's gone to be with God, and the flowers, they're all gone. Nothing's there to greet the gentle summer shower. But every now and then I find a picture creeps into my mind of the happiness that lived as Mama's flowers. Red and yellow, blue and gold, they brought her joy and fed her soul. She'd be out there in the early There was love in every one of Mama's flowers. There was love in every one of Mama's flowers. All right. That's the way George tells it. He's a good old friend. Let's see. Janelle asked me to do this one. Steve Gwen and Ephrata told me this story, and I guess I'll leave it up to you to decide whether it's true or not. It could be. I made the story into a poem called The Snakeskin Hat Band. The sun was sinking in the west as Slim put his horse away. He'd been gathering pears out of the brakes, and it had been a long, hard day. His back was kind of aching, so he thought he'd hit the tub while his wife, who loved him dearly, started rustling up some grub. Well, Slim took off his boots and hat and all his other clothes, and pretty soon he was underwater, all except his nose. As he lay there in that big old tub, his mind began to dream. He had almost fallen clear to sleep when his wife let out a scream. He came up fast, that startled man, which fairly soaked the floor. He quickly donned his boots and hat and bolted for the door. His wife was on the table, yelling, "There's a snake in here!" He grabbed a fireplace iron and said, "I will save you, dear." He started searching in the corner behind the old hi-fi. He didn't look much like a hero, but he had snake blood in his eye. He was crawling around on all fours with that dirty snake in mind when his dog came out of nowhere and put her nose to his behind. Now, just for that split second, you can hardly blame old Slim. He thought instead of being found, that snake had just found him. It was underneath the table where this fateful touch took place, and I'm sure you can imagine old Slim's eyes outgrew his face. When he lunged to escape the serpent's wrath, poor Slim sure hit his head. He lay there on the floor, out cold. His wife thought he was dead. She grabbed the phone from her table perch and dialed 911. "There's a snake in here. My husband's dead. Send someone on the run." Slim's head was still spinning when the paramedic crew arrived a little later, but they knew just what to do. They strapped him to a board and put a collar on his neck. They wondered at his odd attire, but thought, oh, what the heck. They had seen a lot of real strange things in Accident Pursuit. So what's a crazy cowboy in his boots and birthday suit? Now that Slim was getting help, his wife had calmed down some. They thought it odd she was on the table, but they took it as it come. They had just picked up the stretcher and were headed for the door when one glanced down and noticed that big snake there on the floor. It startled him so bad that though he didn't mean no harm, he dropped his end and Slim went down and got a broken arm. The other fella killed the snake while that one patched Slim up. Then they picked him up again and got him loaded in the truck. It was several hours later when Slim got a chance to eat. He had a cast on his right arm, so that was quite a feat. He had a lot of trouble doing things with his left hand, but as soon as he was able to, he made a snake hat band. Okay, true or not for me to decide, just for you. Okay, I'm going to sing a song that my friend Hank Kramer, I think another guy, Les Buffum, helped write this song. It's called The Captain and the Outlaw. The captain left his regiment in Georgia. He was carrying bad memories from the war. The outlaw came riding from Montana, carrying the Colt 44. What brought the two together in Denver, South Dakota, ain't no living man can say, 'cause there's nothing but gun smoke in that straight in South Dakota. And the captain and the outlaw rode away. And the captain and the outlaw rode away. When they knocked down that bank up in Denver, some say they got away with 20 grand. That straight shooting sheriff of thrilled every able-bodied man. They cornered the two in Wyoming. The odds were just 2 against 10. But the captain and the outlaw both rode out alive. The posse and heard from again. The posse and heard from again. Well, legends say they were cold-hearted killers. Got many a man, many go camp hard. But I've also heard they spent some peaceful moments. Took a banjo deep in Colorado stars. They headed west through the Rockies, tried to rob a state near that. That's where I hear them at their end. But I can't help believing when the wind blows through the Rockies that the captain and the outlaw ride again. Yeah, the captain and the outlaw ride again. A century has now come and gone since those desperados vanished in the hill. But if you listen to the local legends, they say the two are right now, they're still. Well, I don't go into much religion, but I heard there's no voices on the wind. Here come fire and lightning and the beats on thunder. There's got fire and lightning and the beats on thunder. Captain and the outlaw again. Captain and the outlaw again. That's the captain and the outlaw. Let's see.
Some good songs here in poetry. So, and all of you who are watching, just want to remind you too that this gets uploaded to YouTube later, and sound quality is actually better on YouTube. So you can always go back and watch it again. And I know I'm going to listen to the poems again too, so I can get them a second time. They're just great. So really appreciate having Glen here.
Thank you, Harriet. This next poem is called Through My Office Window. And I farmed all my life and loved being out there where I was in nature. I wrote this poem a few years ago. And it's always the first line that makes me wait a second. Holy cow. I thought of the first line of the hate poem again. And just give me a second here. I should have wrote a cheater book, huh? I overheard a conversation just the other day. These folks were talking about their work and how they strove to earn their pay. They mentioned all the tasks they did. Their boss sure kept them in place. Then the subject kind of changed and they started comparing office space. It seems that most of this group had just a little cubicle each. There were padded walls between them so they couldn't hear each other's speech. They all had their own computer, a small desk and a phone. And although they were surrounded, they spent most of their time alone. To make it a little more pleasant, there were pictures of kids and spouses, but they could hardly wait till 5 o'clock when they would return to their houses. One had recently been promoted. She had worked there 7 years, and when she talked about her new job, well, she almost shed some tears. One thing was the money, of course. She'd be paid a higher rate, and now her office had a window. She sure thought that made it great. I guess I've always known it, but their talk made me realize I'm lucky doing what I do. My office window is the sky. Instead of seeing the traffic below or the buildings across the street, I see what goes on in nature, and I think it's pretty neat. My boss isn't always nice to me. He's sure no ordinary man. He's cold and fair and kind and harsh. You see, I answer to the land. I put in lots of overtime. Sometimes my boss says, plow, or check those cattle often. Sometimes my boss is a cow. There have been years I've prospered. Other years have been a wreck. But as long as the sky is my window, if I can, I will say, what the heck. Because through my window I've seen the Milky Way when I've had to work at night. And lots of times out baling hay, I've enjoyed the northern lights. To see that big orange harvest moon and to watch the Big Dipper turn is somehow worth more than the money that those Wall Street people earn. My window's always open, just smell that freshly turned soil or that newly cut alfalfa. It's well worth the sweat and toil. Through my window I see newborn calves as they buck and jump and run. I see thunderstorms gather and rage with fury. I see hope in the new rising sun. There's a crow that's an acrobat way up high, and a coyote floating over the snow. The far-off call of the sandhill cranes comes to me through my open window. I'm surrounded right now by fall colors. Soon I'll notice my winter decor, then spring with new hope in each growing thing. I could wrangle till your ears got sore. But suffice it to say, I'm sure thankful that my window is the sky. So I'll deal with the work and the stress, I hope, till the day that I lay down and die. I wrote that between here and Pullman a few years ago. I had to pull off in a wheat field to finish it, but I got her done. Anyway, let's see.
And I have to say that was really beautiful. As having a husband who farms, it's not always easy, but that's why he does it too. And that was really beautiful. I can't wait to share it with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to try an old John Denver song. I'm just learning it, so I'm going to cheat. I'm going to take a little swig of water too. When I was a little bitty boy, just up off the floor, we used to go down to Grandma's house every Sunday store. Had chicken pie, country ham, homemade butter on bread. Let's start playing at Grandma's house with a big bed. It was 19 high, 6 feet wide, something around each hip. It was made from a bed of board, that was used to the whole board block of a kid. It had only kids for $100 and a big head for from the shed. We didn't get much sleep, we had a lot of fun on Grandma's bed. After supper we'd sit around the fire and go for some spinning shoes. I'd call and talk about the farm on the floor and Granny sing about it too. I'd sit and listen and watch the fire go down, but still in my head. Next thing you know, I'd wake in the morning in the middle of the week and bed. It was 19 high, 6 feet wide, something around each hip. Everything from the bed to the board, the beach, the whole block for the thing. It had only kids for $100 and a big head from the shed. We didn't get much sleep, we had a lot of fun on Grandma's bed. Well, I love them all, Granny and Grandpa too. If this was my old wrestle in the curtain, I even kissed Aunt Lou. Ooh, if I ever had a big toy, guess that I could get set. I'd trade them all down the road to Grandma's bed. It was 19 high, 6 feet wide, something around each hip. Everything from the bed to the floor, the other piece of the whole block of the kid. They had only kids for $100 and a big head from the shed. We didn't get much sleep, we had a lot of fun on Grandma's bed. We didn't get much sleep, we had a lot of fun on Grandma's bed. All right, good old Grandma. My mom's 99. Doesn't have a feather bed anymore. She's doing pretty good for 99. Let's see. A poem. Oh yeah, this is a Banjo Paterson poem I'm going to do. I love the cadence and the rhythm of poetry, real poetry. I've read poetry that doesn't rhyme or make sense or sound like poetry, and I don't understand why they call it poetry. But this is poetry, written by Banjo Paterson, who is an Australian poet. Talks about taking the cattle to the mountains to get away from the drought, and later bringing the cattle back when the drought was over. And I like the variation in the cadence in this poem. With the cattle is what it's called. And I remember the first line right now. The drought is down on field and flock. The riverbed is dry. And we must shift the starving stock before the cattle die. We muster up with weary hearts at breaking of the day and turn our heads to foreign parts to take the stock away. And it's hunt 'em up and dog 'em, and it's get the whip and flog 'em, for it's weary work is droving when they're dying every day, by stock routes bare and eaten on dusty roads and beaten. With half a chance to save their lives, we take the stock away. We cannot use the whip for shame on beasts that crawl along. We have to drop the weak and lame and try to save the strong. The wrath of God is on the track. The drought fiend holds his sway. With blows and cries and stock whips crack, we take the stock away. As they fall, we leave them lying with the crows to watch them dying, grim sextons of the overland that fasten on their prey. By the fiery dust storm drifting and the mocking mirage shifting, in heat and drought and hopeless pain, we take the stock away. In dull despair the days go by with never hope of change, but every stage we feel more nigh the distant mountain range. And some may live to climb the pass and reach the great plateau to revel in the mountain grass by streamlets fed with snow. And as the mountain wind is blowing, it starts the cattle lowing and calling to each other down the dusty long array. And there speaks a grizzled drover, well, thank God the worst is over. The creatures smell the mountain grass that's 20 miles away. They press toward the mountain grass. They look with eager eyes upon the rugged stony pass that slopes up to the skies. Their feet may bleed from rocks and stones, but though the blood drop starts, they struggle on with stifled groans, for hope is in their hearts. And the cattle that are leading, though their feet are worn and bleeding, are breaking to a kind of run. Pull up and let them go, for the mountain wind is blowing and the mountain grass is growing. They'll settle down by running streams, ice cold with melted snow. The days of heat and drought are gone upon the stricken plain. The wind has shifted right about and brought the welcome rain. The river runs with sullen roar, all flecked with yellow foam, and we must take the road once more to bring the cattle home. And its lads will raise a chorus. There's a pleasant trip before us, and the horses bound beneath us as we start them down the track. And the drovers canter, singing through the sweet green grasses springing toward the far-off mountain land to bring the cattle back. Are these the beasts we brought away that move so lively now? They scatter off like flying spray across the mountain's brow, and dashing down the rugged range we hear the stock whips crack. Good faith, it is a pleasant change to bring such cattle back. And it's steady down the lead there, and it's let them stop and feed there, for they're wild as mountain eagles, and their sides are all afoam. But they're settling down already, and they'll travel nice and steady. With cheery call and jest and song, we fetch the cattle home. We have to watch them close at night, for fear they'll make a rush and break away in headlong flight across the open bush. And by the campfire's cheery glow, with mellow voice and strong, we hear the lonely watchman raise the overlander's song. Oh, it's when we're done with roving, with the camping and the droving. It's homeward down the bland we'll go, and nevermore we'll roam. While the stars shine out above us like the eyes of those who love us, the eyes of those who watch and wait to greet the cattle home. The plains are all awave with grass, the sky is the deepest blue, and leisurely the cattle pass and feed the long day through. But when we sight the station's gate, we make the stock whips crack, a welcome sound to those who wait to greet the cattle back. And through the twilight falling, we can hear the children calling as the cattle splash across the ford and churn it into foam. And the children run to meet us, and our wives and sweethearts greet us. They're heroes of the overland that brought the cattle home. Okay, how's my time? Do I have time for one more song? Okay. This is a kind of an ultimate cowboy song. It was written by a guy named Michael Burton. Many people recorded it, including Garth Brooks, and it's a good old cowboy song. One night while I was out riding, graveyard shift, midnight till dawn. The moon was as bright as a reading light, must have gone crazy out there. He said last night her mom, Jenny, she's married and has a good life. Sure missed the track when he never came back. She's the perfect professional's wife. And she asked me, why does he ride for his money? Why does he rope for short pay? He ain't getting nowhere, and he's losing his share. Oh, he must have gone crazy out there. Ah, but they never sing northern lights. Never sing a hawk on the wing. They've never spent spring at the Great Divide. And they've never heard old canned cookies sing. Well, I read up the last of my letter, tore off the stem for Black Jim. Billy rode up to relieve me. He just looked at my letter and he grinned, and he asked me, why do they ride for their money? Why do they ride for short pay? They ain't getting nowhere, and they're losing their share. Oh, they must have gone crazy out there. Yeah, they all must be crazy out there. Yodelay, 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 oh, yodelay, 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 My half hour's up. Thank you, Harriet.
Oh, Glenn, I just want to thank you. I had a front row seat to this, and it was so wonderful. I hope you enjoyed it too. They say a good performance is when you laugh and you cry. And you made me do both tonight, Glenn. So thank you so much for tuning in. Next week, I'm not sure what our program's going to be. I think in 2 weeks, we're going to do your favorite hymns and spiritual songs. So if you want to text me, or even on Facebook Live right now, just kind of say what maybe a hymn or spiritual song or gospel song that you'd like to hear. We'll try to find some musicians and make that happen in 2 weeks. Next week, not quite sure what's going to happen yet, but I'll keep you posted. Thanks again so much for tuning in, and for all our faithful ones every Monday night. Just really appreciate you too. So thanks. Good night.